Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, Baseball Prospectus put out their latest Dodgers top prospect list. We're going to talk about some of the surprises and some of the interesting notes from that. And I'm going to tell a little unknown story about the guy who is currently the oldest living Dodger. So that's what's on tap. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Dodger fans. This is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time watching or listening, I am Jeff Snyder. My co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me tonight. Vince is still stuck in Mexico with the death of his grandfather. Our thoughts are with him, and hopefully he will be back with me tomorrow. And Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans, just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. And that's what we're going to do here today. As I mentioned at the top, Baseball Prospectus put out their latest Dodgers prospect ranking list. And it's always an exciting time when that comes out to kind of see where things stand. And one of the things that really jumped out at me, I'm just going to jump into this. There was a lot of interesting stuff here, and I could probably do a whole week's worth of episodes just on this, but I know not everybody is prospect huggers, but some things that jumped out at me, even, I like prospects. I'm not an expert in prospects, but I'm interested in them. But there are some things that really jumped out to me. One of the things is just how different this year's top 10 list looks compared to their top 10 list for the Dodgers a year ago at this time. The top three are all the same, although all in a different order. Last year is Miguel Vargas, Diego Cartaya, Bobby Miller, in that order. Now, this year's Diego Cartaya, Bobby Miller, Miguel Vargas. So basically just pop Vargas from 1 to 3 and bump the other guys each up one spot. It all makes sense. And when you read the descriptions, really, it's not really a knock on anybody. Vargas didn't drop because he struggled. Cartaya and Miller both just happened to move past him. Probably has something to do too with the fact that Vargas will lose his prospect status, hopefully in the next couple months when he becomes a full-time big leaguer. I don't know if that will play into it at all or not, but last year's list, after you got past there, it was Andy Pages, Ryan Pepio, Michael Busch, and then Maddox Bruns, Horbit Vivas, Eddie Leonard, and Andre Jackson. All four of those, the bottom four there, Bruns, Vivas, Leonard, and Jackson, aren't in the top 10 anymore. Actually, Pepio is not either. Pepio is down at number 11. And we've got basically a whole new list there. Gavin Stone comes in at number 4, Nick Nastrini at number 5, Dalton Rushing at number 6, Michael Busch at 7, Nick Frasso at 8, Pages at 9, and James Outman at number 10. So really an interesting change to the overall top 10, which, things change over the course of years. Some of this, Pepio's struggles in the big leagues definitely caused him to drop some in the list, and other guys moved up. And so it's how it goes. Dalton Rushing was one that was really, really interesting to me. I'm not surprised at all that Dalton Rushing is so high. And they kind of say in here that they were a little bit surprised that they put him as high as they did. I'm just going to read you the whole report. It says, just what the Dodgers needed, another power-hitting catching prospect. Rushing destroyed the ball at Louisville his junior season, then was even better in his pro debut in the Cal League. He's able to consistently hit the ball hard in the air despite a pretty compact left-handed swing and is already making plus swing decisions in the minors. Rushing is out there trying to pull and lift, so there will be some in-zone holes that better pitchers can exploit. He's not going to hit 400 going forward, sorry, but he picks the right pitches to hack at generally, and I'd expect at least an average hit tool to go with plus or potentially plus pop. That's scout talk, by the way. Plus means above average, plus means super awesome. says that kind of bat would make Rushing one of the best catching prospects in baseball if he was going to stick at catcher. And, well, he's one of the best catching prospects in baseball. He's not a plus defender by any means, although the arm strength certainly grades out there, but he's perfectly fine, if a little stiff, with his receiving and is already built like the requisite fire hydrant. Rushing's track record is short, even considering his college years. He backed up Henry Davis and didn't play a ton his first 2 years with the Cardinals, but that's really the only thing keeping him from passing his former college teammate, among others, in the catching prospect ranks. Basically, they're gushing about Rushing, and I get it. I've seen Rushing play in person only one time. The dude can hit. He can hit, and they. I almost feel like they're being conservative with Dalton Rushing's listing. They have him at number 6 on the Dodgers. And I think some of that is just, well, he's only been here half a season. Maybe we need to take a break. And one of the things, they have a little section on the variance, how high a variance does he have? And they listed him as high variance. They said Rushing hasn't caught much, and 55/70 bats, meaning 55 hit tool, 70 power tool on the scouting scale, meaning good hitter, great power. Those bats can become 45, 55 bats over the long slog of a minor league catching career. On the other hand, if we're more confident in these top end offensive grades in a year or two, Rushing might look a lot like another recent Louisville catcher, and that links to a link to Will Smith. Yeah, Dalton Rushing, he is an exciting one on this list, so I was excited to see him there. Another one that jumped out at me is Nick Frasso. If you don't know that name, he is the guy they got in the trade from the Blue Jays for Mitch White, which, put another way, they got him for nothing. And Frasso throws 100 miles an hour, and basically they say he's tall and gangly, mostly legs, and his delivery features limbs flying every which way. The end result is you think the fastball is going to come from a lower slot than it does, and the pitch shows good vertical angle as well. Frasso pairs the plus fastball with a razor blade upper 80s slider that isn't particularly much to look at, but just dives under bats at the last moment. His mid 80s change has plus potential as well. They talk about his relief risk just because he's a 23-year-old with funky mechanics coming off elbow surgery, but he throws a lot of strikes, even though he's got the weird delivery. And so they talk about how he could be a starting pitcher, or he could be a closer, a late inning reliever. And again, they give him a high variance, but it was when you look at what the Dodgers did, what they got for Mitch White, and I think Frasso, because he was coming off elbow surgery, the Blue Jays were more willing to give him up, and the Dodgers saw that potential there and have already started to turn him into more than he was with Toronto, and hopefully they'll continue to do that. Seeing him on this list at all made me smile. Just it seems like it has potential to be a real win for Andrew Friedman in that trade. I'm going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about a few more things about this prospect list that jump out at me. Gavin Stone, Nick Nastrini, Bobby Miller, Andy Pajes, Michael Busch. I think I'm going to talk about all those things in the next segment. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From pro football to college bowl season to basketball and everything else, we've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. It means a lot to Vince and me. We love talking Dodgers with you. You may have noticed yesterday's episode, we actually didn't do a Locked On Dodgers. We posted a crossover episode along with a lot of the other shows on the Locked On Podcast Network. We gave you a special year-end episode of the Locked On Sports Today podcast, talking about everything that happened in 2022. I hope you enjoyed that. And when you're done with this, thanks for making us your first listen. But when you're done, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. It's the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. All right, let's jump back into this prospect list. so much stuff here. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of words here about Dodgers prospects. And so I'm not going to get to everything, but I'm going to touch on some of the things that did jump out at me. Nick Nastrini is another name that you might not know really well. He was drafted by the Dodgers in 2021, and he was drafted out of UCLA. He jumped all the way up. He wasn't on the list at all last year. He jumped all the way up to number 5 on the Dodgers list. And I'm interested to see, as other prospect lists come out over the next several months, if other groups have Nastrini as high as BP does. He was higher than I expected, but you read their description, says yet another college arm who has seen big stuff gains with the Dodgers. Nastrini has a little less fastball than Bobby Miller, a little less present secondaries, and similar command issues. But despite a bit more volatility than the arms ahead of him, and I'm going to talk about Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone in a minute, he is yet another mid-rotation or better starting pitching prospect. Mid-rotation or better. Like, it says Nastrini sits mid-90s, touching higher with the fastball, and it has some decent ride up in the zone from his three-quarter slot. Like Gavin Stone, his changeup is his best secondary, although it's merely plus. It's a bit firmer, but has enough sink to get under bats, and he sells it well with his arm speed. And then both of his breaking balls have above average potential too, a curveball and a slider. Nastrini is a guy who, again, they give him a high variance. And I think that's what drops these guys a little bit lower. That's why Dalton Rushing was a little bit lower. It's why Nick Frasso is a little bit lower. And it's why Nastrini is lower, because they have a higher variance. About Nastrini, they say everything is a bit more volatile here. Nastrini gives up more dingers than you'd think given the stuff, throws fewer strikes than you'd like for a starter, and thus is more likely to be a reliever than Gavin Stone or Bobby Miller. His upside is right there with them, though, even if at this exact moment we're a bit less confident he gets there. And that upside thing is the thing. They're saying Nick Nastrini could be as good as Gavin Stone and Bobby Miller in the big leagues if he develops right. They're less confident in that, but skills wise, talent wise, it's right there. Diego Cartaya came in at number 1, and it's kind of interesting. He's their number 1 prospect, but the report was a little bit not quite negative, but it talked about how he didn't hit quite as well in 2022 as he did the year before. They're really concerned a little bit about the injuries. He's only played, it says, his large physical stature can be detrimental as a backstop, placing limitations on his mobility and quickness. He's already dealt with multiple injuries over his young career, restricting him to just 95 games played at the catcher position since the start of the 2021 season. Despite Cartaya's solid arm strength, opposing base stealers have enjoyed an 80% success rate, signaling there's more work to be done. Basically, they're not thrilled about his defensive potential. They think he can probably hold his own as a catcher, but they're so excited about his hitting that he's still the Dodgers' number 1 prospect. And even when they're talking about him not hitting as well in 2022 as he did the year before, and yet he was really, really good last year. He hit 22 homers. And that was with a lower BABIP. So he may have even had a little bit of bad luck in 2022. Takes a lot of walks, strikes out more than you would like, but takes a lot of walks, hits the ball really, really hard when he does hit it. And his variance, they have it as medium. They said, while his floor may be a right-handed hitting DH capable of launching plenty of dingers, there remains a lot of uncertainty in Cartaya's overall development going forward. His health is a significant concern, with those 95 games played last season being the most he's played in 3 seasons as a pro. If he's able to stay healthy, he then has to prove he can provide some value behind the plate, even if it's as a part-time catcher. Still just 21 years old, Cartaya has a high ceiling and plenty of time to reach it. And I think that 21 years old thing is really, really the big key with Cartaya. The way he's hitting, he's facing pitchers much older than him, and he's dominating them. And that's what excites them, because, if he develops for another year and a half, he's going to be ready for the big leagues to be a very, very good hitter. And whether that's at catcher, maybe they go to automatic strike zone, which changes some of what's needed from a catcher defensively. Maybe that helps him. Cartaya, it's funny how negative the description is, but when you read between the lines, it's like, oh, even with the negatives, they are really excited about this guy. Bobby Miller is kind of the same thing. He's a number 2 prospect, and they talk about his command issues. He throws too many, he walks too many guys, or just general inefficiency, he says. The command and strike throwing with the pitch still aren't quite sharp enough, though, and that can lead to a few too many walks or just general inefficiency. And the difference there is not all wildness leads to walks. We saw that with Ryan Pepio this last year. We've seen it with Tony Gonsolin in the past. We saw it with Clayton Kershaw early in his career, throwing too many pitches, and so you can't get deep into games because you're throwing 18 to 20 pitches per inning, and that's going to get you knocked out after 4 or 5 innings. And that's one of the concerns about Bobby Miller that they have. But his stuff is so good. And one of the things that really excited me about Bobby Miller, they said Miller's fastball might legitimately be his 4th best pitch. If you remember Bobby Miller's fastball, he throws at 100 miles an hour with what they call decent ride. But they said it might be his 4th best pitch. Both of Miller's breaking balls are easy. Plus, the curve is a low 80s 12-5 breaker that he can dump at the back foot of lefties, but it's equally effective when he drops it into the zone, given how batters will give up on it. The slider is a smooth shave electric razor of a pitch, upper 80s with less depth and run than the curve, but late bat missing action. Miller's changeup isn't as visually impressive, but the 10 to 15 mile an hour gap off the fastball leads to plenty of whiffs despite the less than impressive depth or fade. Miller has 4 legitimate pitches. They say 4 plus or better pitches in his repertoire. And it says, yeah, the command isn't great, and he may be a frustrating starter at times, but Miller is going to be a starter and a good one. They gave him just medium variance. They say they could see him ending up being a high leverage reliever, even a multi-inning reliever, but more likely, they think that he is going to be a very good starting pitcher. Other thoughts. Let's see. I'm just looking at my list of other things. Andy Pajas was an interesting one for me. He dropped all the way down to number 9. And one of the things that scared me a little bit, I'm saving Gavin Stone for last, by the way, because I'm so excited about Gavin Stone. Just so you know, he's coming. Andy Pajas dropped down to number 9, and they said Paja's defensive profile was always going to be his offensive profile was always going to be tested in AA, and the 2022 results were mixed. His extra base hit rate fell a little bit, but he still smacked over 25 bombs with plenty of doubles to boot. His K rate was almost bang on the same, and while he hit a few more ground balls, he still has an elite fly ball rate. And then here's the part that concerns me. However, staff reports on Pajas questioned the strength of the swing decisions in AA and wondered whether he would stick in the outfield. He was an average runner on last year's report, but he's lost speed and gotten stiffer in his actions. If he's a first baseman or designated hitter, merely 25 plus bombs might not be enough given the offensive bar at those spots. And under variance to said medium, Pajas continues to tilt towards the 3 true outcomes, and he has the kind of raw power that will make that boom or bust profile play. But if he hits 240 and can't play right field, he's more of a second division or fringe starter. Those defensive concerns about Pajas concern me. If he can't play the outfield, he used to be a center fielder, and we knew he wasn't going to stick in center, but now he might not even stick in the corner outfield. And as a DH, the Dodgers don't have a spot at first base, and as a DH, the offensive bar is so high, you have to be a very, very good hitter to be a legitimate DH in the big leagues. And it would be a bummer to see Pajas drop out of the outfield and have to go to one of those positions. I've said before on this podcast, Pajas always strikes me as a guy the Dodgers might trade just simply because the fit doesn't seem right on the Dodgers. And, if they do swing any trades this offseason, I still expect Pajas to be one of the guys likely to be included in that trade. Michael Busch is a guy we've talked about because he was drafted he played first base in college. Dodgers drafted him, turned him into a second baseman. He's also played the outfield and stuff. And our concern about Busch was if he can handle second base defensively now that the shift has been banned. And what they talk about him as a great hitter, said he's a legitimate big league hitter right now. They say his versatility also extends to the defensive side, where the second baseman by trade manned left field and first base at times last season. While he's not flashy with the leather, his athleticism and baseball IQ allow him to provide adequate defense at multiple positions. Busch may be most valuable as a super utility player, capable of spelling teammates across the diamond while providing some offensive firepower. And they have him as low variance, which is one of the few low variance ones. The 25-year-old Busch has 259 minor league games under his belt, 249 of them of which were played at AA and AAA. He plays the game with veteran savvy and has a strong grasp of who he is as a ball player. So Michael Busch can hit, and that the idea of him being a utility player, I hadn't thought about, and it's interesting to me. And yeah, I don't know. I still don't know what to make of Michael Busch for 2023, but the thought of him as a utility player has me thinking anyway. I'm going to come back in a minute. I told you I'm going to get to Gavin Stone. He's the only one I have left on this. I'm going to talk about him in a minute, and then I'm going to tell you a little story about the oldest living Dodger and the one game that he played in the big leagues. So thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. It really does mean a lot to us. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'd love to hear your comments in the YouTube comments section. I got one interesting. We got a lot of comments on the Trevor Bauer episode, as you can imagine, as you may have seen if you looked at YouTube. I appreciate I got a lot of kind words about that episode. It was a hard episode to do. I also got one guy complaining that I went 15 minutes without talking about baseball. And I had to remind him that Trevor Bauer is a baseball player and it's not baseball season. So while I could have, I guess, done a recap of some random game from July, instead I talked about what's happening in Dodgers news, like news about Dodgers players like Trevor Bauer. So I apologize if that hurt that commenter's tender sensibilities, and I appreciate the rest of you. And if you're not watching on YouTube and you're listening on the podcast instead, love to hear from you through social media or email or whatever, and I will give you all that contact info at the end. All right, last thing on the prospect list, and then I'm going to talk about the story about the oldest living Dodger. Last thing on the list is Gavin Stone. He comes in as the Dodgers' number 4 prospect. He wasn't listed. He wasn't ranked last year on their list. And Gavin Stone, I'm going to read you this whole description. Stone now has 2 seasons of upper minor league dominance under his belt, and he was even better in the upper minors in 2022. 2 seasons of minor league dominance. He's even better in the upper minors in 2022 than he was in A-ball the year before. And then this sentence, it made me smile. His changeup might flat out be the best in the minors. It tunnels well off the fastball with a big sink and run, and when it isn't missing bats, which it is a lot of the time, it induces weak ground ball contact. It's an easy plus pitch for me visually, and if he can maintain the same kind of contact and contact suppression results with it in the majors, it would be hard to argue it isn't elite. Unsurprisingly, Stone throws the change almost as much as his fastball, which is mid-90s with excellent vertical action. His command of the fastball is less excellent, but he keeps it off the fat part of the barrel enough. He also has a pretty good slider, which plays especially well off his change, showing similar depth, but taking a sharp left turn instead of fading off to the right. There really isn't much to nitpick here. I will note he was a small college reliever converted to the rotation, but he threw 120 innings this year without issue, and the delivery is just fine for a starter. I suppose there's still a relatively short track record of this level of dominance, but it's not that short, and there's little reason to doubt the gains of the player and the org are real. This will be a recurring theme throughout this list. And he also has a low variance. Stone maybe doesn't have the pure upside and stuff that Miller has, but his change might be the best single pitch between the two of them. Both the fastball and slider should settle in as above average, and he's close to the majors. Gavin Stone, you look at his results from last year. He was awesome. 3 different levels of the minors, high A, double A, and triple A. His worst level was double A, where he had a 1.6 ERA. That was his worst. He was 144 in high A and 116 in triple A. Just outstanding. And he's everything about Gavin Stone excites me. And I'm a sucker for a good changeup. And hearing that his changeup is probably the best in the minor leagues right now, that's pretty awesome. And he pairs it. He has command. I can't wait to see Gavin Stone in the big leagues. That's what it boils down to. And I don't know how else to say it, but I was excited to read how Baseball Prospectus said it. And again, I feel like they're being conservative there. Like right now, I like I said, I'm not a prospect expert, but right now I think I'd put Gavin Stone ahead of Bobby Miller because I think he's a more sure thing to be successful. I think Bobby Miller is going to be very good too. But yeah, so I'm excited about Gavin Stone. And Gavin, if you're watching, hit me up. Let's get you on the show. Last thing I want to talk about today. I was going through some interesting stuff. I was looking at an article about people who died in 2022, including three Dodgers legends, obviously Vin Scully, Tommy Davis, and Maury Wills, all passed away in 2022. And I was just thinking, I wonder who the oldest living Dodger is now. And Carl Erskine is the oldest living, what we would consider a Dodger legend. But there's a guy who is a year older than Carl Erskine, who played for the Dodgers. His name is Chris Haughey. I think it's pronounced Haughey. I actually Googled to try to figure it out. It's an Irish name. It's Haughy. In Ireland, it's like Haughey. But in America, it's generally just pronounced Hoey or Howie. Um, he pitched exactly one game, and it was on his 18th birthday. He had signed with the Dodgers, so he was from Queens near Brooklyn. He was a Dodger fan. He was playing like sandlot games, and he signed with the Dodgers when he was 17 years old, about a month before his 18th birthday. And at the time, Leo DeRocher promised, he was the Dodgers manager, he promised that he would get Hoey into a major league game that year. He promised Chris's mom that. And on his 18th birthday, it was the last game of the season, and the Dodgers were in third place. They were playing the Reds, who were in second place. There was nothing to play for between them and the Reds. The Reds were going to finish in second place, and at that point back then, there was no wild card or anything. Neither team was going to the postseason. It was just season's going to be over. But the Dodgers were still fighting for third place, and then they got word early in their game that the Phillies Pirates game had gone. I forget which way it needed to go. Whoever was right behind the Dodgers had lost, and so the Dodgers were guaranteed third place. And so after the first inning, the first inning was pitched for the Dodgers by a guy named Whit Wyatt. The Reds pitcher that day was Johnny Vandermeer, famous for being the only pitcher ever throw no-hitters in 2 straight starts. But Whit Wyatt started the game, had a 1-2-3 first inning, and then after they found out that they were guaranteed third place, Leo DeRocher made good on his word, and he put in Chris Haughey to pitch. And Haughey pitched the rest of the game. And for the first 6 innings he pitched, he didn't allow any earned runs. He allowed 2 unearned runs that scored because of an error by third baseman Gil Hodges, who was also making his major league debut. Chris Haughey and Gil Hodges made their major league debuts the same day. Hodges obviously went on to a long and ultimately Hall of Fame career. Haughey did not. This was also the last big league game for Al Campanis, who later became the Dodgers general manager. Obviously had the unfortunate incident that ended his career as Dodgers general manager in 1987. And his son Jim also played for the Dodgers. Jim's son Jim played in the minor leagues, is a friend of mine. Al Campanis was playing his last game. Gil Hodges was playing his first game. And as it turned out, Chris Haughey was playing both his first and last game. And through 6 innings, he had just allowed 2 unearned runs. And then in the 8th inning, so his 7th inning of work, the wheels came off. He allowed a single to Eric Tipton, a walk to Lon Goldstein, a single to Dane Clay, a double to Steve Messner, a walk to Eddie Miller, a ground ball double play by Ray Mueller, but that scored a run. And then a pickoff, but an error, scored another run. And then finally a line out by Vandermeer to end the inning. That it was 4 runs scored that inning to make the score 6-1. And he took the loss in his only game. Yeah, in the end, he allowed 6 runs, only 3 of them earned in 7 innings. So a respectable career ERA of 3.86. But he walked 10 batters that game. He allowed 5 hits and 10 walks. And so his whip for his career was 2.143. His walks per 9 was 12.9. And his strikeouts per 9 was 0.0 because he didn't strike anybody out. So his strikeout to walk ratio was 0.0, which is not what you're looking for. But all in all, he played that one game. And what happened next was the day he had signed with the Dodgers a month before his 17th birthday or before his 18th birthday, he had also gotten his draft into the military. And so he went off to serve in the military, spent 3 years. And from what I read, due to a dispute with his commanding officer, he wasn't allowed to play on the baseball teams that a lot of military members got to play baseball. He didn't. And so when he got out of the military, he hadn't thrown a baseball in 3 years. And the Dodgers sent him to one of their minor league affiliates. It wasn't the same minor leagues that they have now. So it wasn't teams that were officially affiliated, but sent him to the minor leagues. He eventually got taken in the Rule 5 draft by the Cardinals and kicked around in the minor leagues until at least 1950. This was 1943 that he made his game, or his one game. And you may have noticed when I was reading the names of the Reds players who got hits, you never really heard of many of them. That's because it was 1943. Most of Major League Baseball was serving in World War II at the time, and it was a weird time. And you often get, anytime you see a guy who only got a short cup of coffee in the major leagues, a lot of time it happened during World War II because so many players got chances who wouldn't have otherwise. Chris Haughey is definitely one of those, but he was born on October 3rd, 1925, which means he just turned 97 a couple months ago. He's still alive. Last I saw, he was living in Northern California, in Pleasanton, California, I think. And yeah, still alive. Oldest living Dodger. And the only, or one of only a couple players to have played for, I think he and I guess there's a few Brooklyn Dodgers left. But he's one of just a handful of Brooklyn Dodgers who's still alive. By my count, I'm seeing 6 probably. Chris Haughey. Oh no, there's more than that. 8 or 10. But it was interesting. I never heard of this guy, and yet he's kind of like the Moonlight Graham character from Field of Dreams, who got one game and thought there would be more and never did get more. And that was kind of Chris Haughey's life. And he went on. He got a degree in engineering and worked in, had a long life, is still living a long life, and seems to have enjoyed his life and got that one day in the big leagues. And I thought that was a cool story that I came across, so I thought I'd share that here. I apologize to the guy on YouTube that if that's not enough about baseball for you. But this game happened. Wow, 1943 was long. What was that? 79 years ago. Wow, that is a long time ago. But good for that guy, Chris Haughey. And with that, I'm going to be done for today. Like I said, Vince will hopefully be back with me tomorrow. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. If you're not watching or listening to Locked On Dodgers every day, we'd love if you add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation. If you have friends or family who love the Dodgers like you do, please tell them about the show. Maybe they'll like it. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Samperio. I am on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK, 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.